Afternoon. The third day after Shell. Solani ignored a few glances from curious onlookers as she perused the files. The library had expanded the human database to be searchable from the desk omnis, so after the encounter with Friar Barcio, she slipped from the exhibit into a study hall to search through the endless records in relative privacy. It was shocking that one planet could produce such a profusion of media, but practical search criteria helped to narrow things down. First, she set the parameter to his native English, then limited the search to the past 20 years. Something current seemed best, and the translator on her Omnipad was already getting a workout. She gave a long and careful thought about how to express her feelings, and while personal and embarrassing, the keywords she'd chosen reduced the returns from tens of thousands to thousands, then from thousands to hundreds. When she finally hit a return with just over 400, she bit her lip in thought. Would Tom respond better to a song done by a man or a woman? If he were a Shilvanti male, she'd have picked a song sung by another woman. Probably. It was more intimate, so something sung by a woman made sense when courting a man. It was coming from her, after all. On the tip of the other tusk, Tom was a human, and she'd seen him behave like a woman when the mood took him. Not merely like one of the gals. Mature, but still. Yet, more important, this was something that would reach Miver and Shalea, and while this wouldn't make her first impression with them, it still needed dignity. They being kind, understanding, and welcoming, everything she'd ever wanted from co-wives. Miver was a noble, a lady in every sense of the word, and Leia was the salt of the ocean. Coming on too strong would look bad, or desperate, or both. Something he could sing would be nice, so maybe something sung by a man was alright. King her search in both ways didn't help. There were still hundreds of entries. Did it matter? This was coming from her. It had to be something that spoke to her feelings. It had to be real. Sincere. Unafraid to say what she yearned to say, even if she didn't know exactly how to say it. She looked at the search words one more time, and made an addition. 41 results. That was better, and on a whim she sorted the list by title. Checking the time, Solani bit her lower lip, set up the translator, and listened, as the first melody began to play. She'd been at it for over an hour when the clock marked noon, and she arched her back, wishing she picked out a more comfortable chair. Still, she'd gone through nearly half the files and marked down a few as promising. Leaning back in the chair, she rubbed her neck and started the next. After a minute, she started the file over, paying more attention to the lyrics. Hello, my old heart, how have you been? Are you still there, inside my chest? I've been so worried, you've been so still, barely beating at all. Good afternoon, this is Secretary Del Treint calling from Princess Riley Tonhair Kotasu's office. Might Gedris Felin be available? Yes, I'll hold. Del settled back in his chair, pondering the morning. The long conversation with Shalea Lanar Copelavon had been delightful. The woman was clearly out to sea on what to do with her husband. Once he'd gotten her talking, it turned out she had a wonderfully straightforward manner. In the Imperial Palace, that was as refreshing as a breath of cool air on a hot summer day. Gedris? Del smiled as the familiar voice came on the line. Gedris Valin was a lovely woman, though unmarried, and she had been quite gracious to his wife at his sister's 40th birthday celebration. His wife found her quite charming, and after all, it was never too late to consider a fourth at their stage of... Yes, it's Del. Why, thank you. That's very flattering. I agree, it's been far too long. Gedris' party was a lovely evening. Leaning back, he closed his eyes and nodded at the inedible stream of pleasantries. While par for the course with many single women, at his age it was flattering to receive them at all. He'd raised his children and had his career, of course, but retirement was looming on the horizon, and his wives had some concerns. Penra retired last year, and while his work for the Imperial House was prestigious, 2 pensions and Rit's income would only go so far. While they were reasonably fixed for now, Rit only had a few years to go herself. Adding another to the family could have merit, but Gedris was the best of friends with his sister, after all, and she was certainly keen. Polite, but keen. You're still in charge of the role of wardens, I presume? Ah, that's wonderful. As it happens, I'm calling on behalf of Lady Shalea, who's a particular favourite of Princess Riley. Yes, they're all quite happy. Ah, well, yes, you have guessed my intentions precisely, Dell said, warming to the conversation and gushing slightly. Gedris was a charming woman, and it cost nothing to return the favour. You know how these things are, but Riley is never in the habit of trading on her station, so of course we like to look after the lady's needs. No, it's her husband, actually. No, I'm given to understand he is a veteran, but I don't have his records. Still, if you could look into it, I'd be ever so grateful. Dell examined his nails idly as he listened to Gedris go through the motions. Certainly she had the prestige of her office to consider, but with thousands of positions to fill. Still, she'd gone on about the trial of finding a few hundred candidates every year at Kedris' party. Yes? Oh, I'm sure the turnover in winter makes things difficult. Really? That's wonderful. Oh, it's Thomas Warwick. Yes, I'll send you the file from our office along with a recommendation, pending your review and approval, naturally. Yes, that's precisely what I thought too, but I couldn't place the name. Did he now? So that's the fellow. How very extraordinary. No, I agree. It's wonderful to see a fellow from the Rim colonies making good. I very much appreciate you sparing some time on this, and... Why, yes, I think dinner does sound lovely. Just the four of us? I'll talk to Penra and Reet, and we'll set something up for next shell. Yes, I'm looking forward to it as well. Until then. Dell hung up the connection with a smile on his face. It was a good day's work, and Riley was a dear. Her requests were so few and far between that no one ever wanted to refuse her. Thomas Warwick. He'd heard the name, of course, saving all those schoolchildren. Quite marvellous to see a man making a mark in a woman's galaxy. Damned odd name for a Shivanti, but that was the Rimworlds for you. Qadira stared at the menu for the banquet. She skimmed through the file several times now without really seeing it, and she pushed the pad away in irritation. She had what she needed. Everything was in place, yet she'd spent the morning out of sorts, fumbling through the documents that crossed her attention. Her triumph was only 3 days away, yet it felt as though the application was squeezing her chest, a weight on her mind as she worked, making her critical of even the most minor of choices. At such times she would normally retreat to her apartment and work out of the office there, securing the outward privacy of her rooms, or the greater privacy of her hidden chamber. It was a sanctuary, but there was too much to attend to. She needed to be out and doing, to be available to the countless scurrying minions that made the Northern Palace function. Or she normally detested the woman who oversaw such administrative trifles. Just now it would have been damn convenient if she hadn't left shill with Camordry. Even retreating to her palace of memory had become difficult. Normally its rooms and galleries were silent, her trophies on display, as she called to mind facts and pondered plans, a shelter within her shelter. But sleep last night had eluded her, and her visit to that place in her mind produced echoes. Voices lingered there, a chorus in the background of her thoughts. She had always prided herself in its creation. It was a skill, and it could be learned, and until now it had always been an invaluable asset. Last night was the first time it had become a liability. She tried to focus on the task at hand. The looming deadline of the banquet made that necessary, but the words on her omnipad continued to elude her. Her mind raced over the expanse of details, merging into an incomprehensible mess of guests, security menus, and minutiae. It was an avalanche of expressions and pestering, distracting her from her work. Her calling. Voices echoed in her thoughts, pestering questions, emails and memories merging into one another, as the pressure of the day mounted. The moment of her greatest act was at hand, and Kalira's death would be... The menu refused to go away, staring up at her like an accusation, as she squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block out the chaos, but the darkness only intensified the echoes in her mind. She needed sleep so very badly. Agent Lamana Duvari considered her quarry as the interview drew to a close. Marakhett, Zinshiki's mother, was the closest thing to impenetrable she'd ever encountered. Usually subjects gave away something, but Pezrin body language wasn't merely different. If the woman represented her species at all, it was entirely absent. Her tail swished occasionally, but otherwise, she could have been interviewing a stone. It was vexing in its fashion, not because she was used to subjects being afraid of her. There was always some fool who thought she was tough enough to hammer rocks with her tits. No, Marakhett was just closed, a void you poured wounds into and nothing came out of. While her questions were answered satisfactorily, the Pezrin woman embellished nothing. She might as well have been talking to an omnipad for all the response, and while she'd get back to the academy with time to spare, the interview didn't satisfy. Still, that wasn't for want of trying. "I'd like to thank you for your time. This is all being very straightforward." She picked up her omnipad, tucking it away. "Oh, there's just one other thing. I don't suppose you can provide references for the boy your daughter is seeing?" "Boy?" Anir twitched. "Yes, she's seen a boy. Parst of the Rifagian. Isn't that just so exciting for your family?" Duvari shrugged, not locking eyes with Marakhett, while her words took on the charade of banal pleasantries, at home in the mouth of Professor Duvari. "They had a contract with Duchess Eliana a few years before your arrival, though we have no records of their current whereabouts. Didn't you know?" The ear definitely twitched. "My daughter is in the company of a boy? A Pezrin boy? Goddess be praised. A complete sentence. Why, yes. He seems to be established at a business known as the Tide Pool. You must be thrilled for her." Lamana slipped back into her chair. "Your daughter seems above reproach, but I was hoping you might know some details. It's always helpful to establish someone's intimate circles." "Oh, don't leave me here alone. Don't tell me that we've grown, for having loved a little while. Oh, I don't want to be alone. I want to find a home, and I want to share it with you." The IOTC hall had been swept 3 times by Lieutenant Tala, who had sworn there was no way to listen in. Solani relaxed, taking an active interest throughout the meeting. As a professional, she found the planning elements on point, though they struck her as unusual. It was a jumbled mess, but it was supposed to be. Ordinarily, she liked her missions clearly defined, but if the objective was supposed to be chaos, this was certainly going to cast a wide net. The interesting thing was that, while each element was pure chaos, they were redundant. Paths crossing and recrossing. But if one of them failed, 2 or 3 others were there to take its place. She still adored Tom, but as the plan unfurled, it became difficult not to see him in a new light. She'd known that he had a sharp mind, but this was cunning. Shrewd, calculated, and even twisted, but definitely cunning. Mavere was there at Tom's side, and had cast glances her way more often than expected. That was something to think about. She sent the note with the music right before the meeting, so they couldn't have seen it yet, but the way Miv kept looking her way made her nervous. Screwing up the courage to hit send before the meeting had definitely been the right choice. The painters were there, in the company of a woman named Marin. The twins, well, they were gifted and intelligent, but as escorts? The girls were besotted with the painters, and the feeling was clearly mutual, so it was good to see someone sensible taking charge. Still, the malware program they created? That was something to worry about, but fortunately it could be someone else's security nightmare. Princess Indara and her entire family conferenced in. That explained the program. An agent in the Northern Palace, another Tom of all things, confirmed the malware was installed in that system. Indara and Adam would be attending the banquet, of course, though the rest of Indara's co-wives? That was a surprise. Agent Duvari was there, and actually seemed in good spirits. Often as not, that could be dangerous, but whatever the Grinshaw had her claws on, she'd been focused on hammering out all the final details, and minding the IOTC girls. Warwick might be taking over their training, but they were in active service for this event. Princess Qadira went over the report from Vadim. He and the IOTC girl confirmed the cadets were trained, and went over the menu. That was odd, but Tom seemed happy with it all. Still, she added things to the table of equipment along with Setar, while Biona sent word to the ground pods. Tala and her pod of EW geeks would be staying in the bunker to handle comms and her element. Then there were the girls and the waiters from the tide pool. If I hadn't seen the wedding, I wouldn't have believed it. At least those were schoolgirls. They're going to give some elderly matriarch a heart attack. All things considered, would anyone notice? As the meeting came to a close and Princess Indara logged out, she caught Mavere looking her way again. Tom had been talking with Princess Qadira, but just now he was staring at his omnipad. Solani felt her stomach give a slow roll, as his brow drew into a frown. What the hell? Melondi discreetly tucked away her omnipad, as Desi nodded encouragement. Lady Wakama will help Monsignor Basilio find some good locations. She'll put him in contact with someone reputable near Prelatori, so if they get homesick for human food, they'll have somewhere to eat. I know you haven't seen much of it, Father, but Prelatori has some really nice areas. Not too expensive yet, but Mr. Desari made a great choice for where to put his restaurant. Desi chimed in encouragingly, though she glanced back at Melondi with moment's apprehension before continuing. If they can afford to buy a property, they'll do even better. Can Monsignor Basilio afford it? Tom snorted. The Vatican? They're comfortably well off. Desi grinned abruptly, catching on. Like, socially secure? Very, Tom chuckled, gazing at Desi jovially. It was clearly a shared joke, and Melondi felt a mixture of happiness for Desi, and a hint of jealousy at their private moment. It made her wonder what it would have been like to know her own father. There wasn't any easy way to say this, but if she couldn't say it now, in front of Desi and Professor Pelavon, when could she? It felt wrong to interrupt their friendly banter, but she felt the ghost of Lady Wakama's elocution lessons taking over. She stood her ground and spoke formally, aware she was trying to lend weight to her words. Formalities mattered. That's why they were formalities to begin with. Professor, I haven't thanked you enough for being willing to do this for me, she began, her words still feeling awkward given the envy she'd felt only moments before. If this all went wrong, feelings could be hurt, or worse, but she needed to know. Sir, I don't want this to sound wrong, but why are you doing this? I'm grateful, but after the lesson on the war, please, I need to know why. Mavere looked as apprehensive as she felt inside, but Tom didn't notice. He paused in fumbling with his omnipad and shrugged. The lesson that follows the war is about what happens when there's no forgiveness. Tom gazed at her intently. As you grow older, you have to make a choice. One day, you find you have to decide if you're going to be your best self or your real self. Choose if you'll be loyal to who you ought to be and live a lie, or who you really are and make the best you that you can. Do you understand? I understand about being Qadira, she said earnestly, glancing over at Desi. Learning to be Melondi has taught me a lot about being Qadira. Sort of the same thing. So am I just the professor who teaches you about humans, or the guy who sees a problem and says, what can I do about it? I made my choice, and no regrets, he replied. And his eyes felt tender as he looked at her and Desi. She felt another fleeting moment's jealousy, but the moment gave way to the gratitude welling up inside her. It was a moment in time, and one she should cherish as her own. Tom returned to prodding at his omnipad, Anyway, time to crash and burn or fly. Let me just check on one thing with Berdine and we can get out of... What the hell? His abrupt exclamation echoed through the room and silence fell immediately. One of the captains stumbled, nearly dropping her omnipad. Tom, what's wrong? Miv stepped in, looking over his shoulder. What is it? This email. Tom jabbed at the omnipad in frustration. It says I've been drafted into something called the Wardens? He waved the omnipad absently before Miv took it from him. What the hell is that? Drafted? I'm too old to be drafted. This is obviously a mistake, and I'm sure we can clear this up. Miv looked to the omnipad, biting her lip. The important thing to remember is that this is nobody's fault. At all. It wasn't me either, but sir, that's wonderful, Melondi beamed, unable to restrain her excitement. It's really just an honorary sinecure for veterans. There's the main palace and north, south, east and west palaces. Anyway, 3 shifts a day, 2 of the wardens come out to perform the rite of the gate. It's for show these days, but you'll get to wear the uniform and it provides an honorarium to about, 18,000 veterans. It's nice. Oh! Desi exclaimed, catching on to her excitement. You mean the ones in the blue and silver uniform with the hat? That's them, she tried to explain, grinning despite his concerns. It's just a 1-hour ceremony and there should be a nice stipend. 1 hour a year? His look was dubious, but he was absorbing her words. That's all? Just 1 hour, honestly. She nodded enthusiastically. Father, you shouldn't mind. Desi took Maver's hand supportively. It's a huge honor. Professor Pelavon was nodding, trying to offer a united front. Besides, you look great in a skirt. Kilt! It's a kilt! Letzi sat on her bed, gazing out of the window at the gloomy day outside. It was just past noon, but fog billowed across the commons, and the sun was hidden away beyond the black storm clouds rolling past. Not a sound of the chaos outside penetrated her window, shrouding her in the darkness of the storm and silence. The storm would have suited her mood perfectly, if she'd been able to feel anything at all. Her thoughts were interrupted by the chime at her doorcom. Letzi, it's Desala. Can I come in? It was best to get this over with, and she drew a deep breath in anticipation. Open. She didn't look back as Desala slipped inside, closing the door behind her. Hi. How are you doing? Letzi closed her eyes in silent supplication to Drebner. This was precisely why she'd never spoken of this to anyone. Her friends had all tried to be supportive that morning, which was wonderful for a time, but it had been easy to see they didn't fully understand. Why would they? She didn't want to embarrass and humiliate herself further by trying to explain, and now this? Fine. I'm fine. Oh, that's good then. There was a sound as Desala slid into the chair. She braced herself for the usual platitudes to begin, but to her surprise, as the minutes passed, Desala sat there without uttering a word, sharing the dim twilight. Letzi watched droplets of water run down the window as the silence stretched on. I embarrassed myself this morning. Sorry. Desala had a tendency to be self-centered, and the very last thing she wanted to hear right now was the world from that perspective. I'm kind of a mess as a friend right now, but thanks for coming by. Look, Letzi, I get it. Goddess, it wasn't that long ago I had to admit my family was cooking our books. I still don't know what I'm going to do about it over summer, but I get it. Honestly. Desala huffed expansively. Parents suck. I mean, we're all here trying to change our worlds, and they've forgotten what that's like. Sure, they want us to be like them, but life isn't all pretty pictures. They don't teach us about the things they did wrong. We have to figure it out all on our own. You really think so? She mumbled, staring sullenly into the grey horizon. I know it. I'll be spending the rest of my life guarding against their mistakes. Sins of the mothers. Desala said quietly, before her voice grew firm. I do get it, and if any of the other girls don't, fuck 'em. Silent lightning flashed across the sky, arcing through the growing storm. Outside, the peal of thunder would surely sound like Hella's own forge, but inside her room, all was lingering silence. She heard Tsala shift about once as more minutes passed. "Did they ever hit you?" she whispered. "Let's see. There was the sound of movement in the chair behind her, and Letzi closed her eyes, unwilling to even watch the storm. "No, never. Yours did?" "Yes." She tucked her legs up against her chest, wishing it was night. It felt like night all the time whenever she remembered. "The first time was on my 4th birthday. My father and mother were there, and my co-mother, Alana, showed up as a surprise. She'd been deployed and no one expected her back, you know, and my father made this big dinner. It was nice, until they started drinking. Both her and my mother. And I didn't finish dinner. It was a big meal, but I didn't finish my olat beans, and my mother's got into a fight. My father did his best, but they were both standing there over me, and that was the first time anyone hit me." Letzi still refused to curl into a ball and show her pain. Tsala had her faults, but she wouldn't talk. "She slammed her fist into my shoulder, hard. It hurt, and I can still remember being so scared, maybe, but confused too. I didn't know why she was so upset. It didn't make any sense." Her mouth felt suddenly dry, and she swallowed, wishing Krek would use the rain to sweep her into the sea, but it didn't happen. "They all just stood there screaming while I cried and tried to finish the olat. Even when they left the room, they kept yelling, so I ran into my bedroom and hid in the closet. I don't know how long it was until my sister found me." She heard Tsala slip on the bed next to her, and felt an arm slip around her shoulder. No one should go through that alone. Just remember your sister was there. "Everything changed after that night. I was just too young to understand." She shook her head, opening her eyes again but seeing nothing. "I had sisters, but not after that. Not really. After a while, my family got my co-mother's drinking under control, but there was just nothing after that. Things didn't get better. Just nothing." "Okay. So no sisters. But I'm your friend." Letzi shrugged. "Maybe hard to deal with now and then, but I am your friend." In the dark of the storm, it was hard to see Letzi's face, even sitting right beside her. "What if someone has no family or friends? What if there's something wrong with me? If I'm a monster and don't know it?" "If a woman has no family or friends, then she might as well jump into the deeps. But Letzi, you aren't a monster. Monsters wouldn't ask. And you have friends," Tsala said firmly, hugging her quickly before settling back, a black silhouette regarding her in the darkness. "Maybe growing up like that makes it harder to feel like people care, but we do. I was 4! She hadn't meant to shout, but the words came out like a wail. It filled her with frustration, and she pounded the mattress with her fist, and remembered the punch. She stared at her hand, woodenly, forcing it to unclench, and when she found her voice, her words were low and even controlled. "Tsala, what if we can't escape how we're made? What if that's all growing up is? The older you get, the more pain you have inside, and it just goes on and on." "We can't change growing up." The words came out carefully as Tsala sorted for her own memories. "We depend on our parents to be who we need them to be, and when they fail, it tears you up inside. But growing up means defining yourself. You have to ask if you're going to be the girl you were then, or if you're going to be the kind of woman you want to be." Letzi watched as the rain spattered against her window, running down in dark rivulets against the grey sky. "Just like that?" "I never said it was simple, just that it's our choice. I'm pretty sure that's why we pick our husbands and co-wives the way we do." Tsala suddenly leaned back and crowed. "We get by with a little help from our friends." The room was still black as pitch in between the lightning, but she blinked in surprise all the same. "I didn't know you liked human music." "Oh, come on. Seriously, who wouldn't do Paul?" Letzi reached over and turned on the desk light. "And when they're right, they're right. You'll get through this with friends, so you're covered. even if you have to bask in my glory. So stop being so gloomy. That's Nshiki's job, and she's better at it." It was a terrible attempt to cheer her up, but somehow she felt less alone all the same. "Bite me!" "I'm pretty sure that's her job too," Desala snorted. "So you do Paul?" Letzi pursed her lips. "Goddess, that sounds so honest." Desala tossed her hair back, cocking her head to look at her sharply. "Tell me you wouldn't bang Paul, silly." "Fine, I'd bang Paul silly," she admitted guiltily. Goddess, she could just feel herself turning blue. Who wouldn't? "Well, Jaxmy and Lark like John, and Nesper likes George." Desala shrugged in answer to her look of disbelief. "Hey, I'm still not comfortable talking around most of them, but I listen. Anyway, that's not as bad as listening to the twins in the bathroom every morning. They like Ringo." The snort came unbidden. It wasn't something a lady should do, but she couldn't help laughing anyway. "Ringo? You are kidding." "I'm not. Get up with me tomorrow. I swear to Nyosa they sing 'Stop and smell the roses' in the shower." Desala shuddered and gave an exaggerated roll of her eyes. One of them belts out, "Stop," and off they go. Every single morning. "Hello, my old heart. It's been so long since I've given you away. And every day I add another stone to the walls I built around you to keep you safe." Marakhett strode through the bustling lobby of the tide pool, gripped in horrified fascination. A male Pezrin? Here? Dispensing with Agent Duvari's interview had been her plan from the start, keeping her answers terse yet honest, but the woman's news made this trip necessary. The establishment was alive with activity, although mostly that seemed to be catering to the midday meal, and the aroma of countless scents assaulted her, while the evidence of other trays was raucously clear. Dispensing with the little Shorvanti who had shown her to a table, she drew out her omnipad and checked the latest text from Sunchaser, their Pathfinder. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Sunchaser would have accompanied her, but there was no element of danger, and so Marakhett set out minutes after the interior woman's departure, securing her station and texting the Pathfinder on the go. Sunchaser must have been busy investigating her request, but the response arrived swiftly. Stop bothering me about that. Have you found information on the Rifagian?" Sort of. I reached out to the Kamoika. They're working a contract in the South Reaches and... The Kamoika are mangy Oryx thieves. Why are you talking to them? We're all Oryx thieves. They're just sloppy. Anyway, mind the 15th Kachat. If a warband has gone missing, it's vital everyone knows. The Kamoika has been in the system longest, and while we don't talk to each other, I am talking to Moonwhisper, the Pathfinder for the Marakhett. They've got the contract out in the asteroid belt. Stargazer of the Chokatat vouches for her. Moonwhisper's the one talking to the Kamoika, until their Pathfinder is ready to talk to me. Their Pathfinder is young for the job and probably doesn't want to consult her band's mother before talking to me, but at least she's willing to share information with Moonwhisper for now, so I'm... Marakhett felt her fangs bare in frustration. Sunchaser could ramble on forever, turning minutes into hours, but at least they weren't in a band meeting now. She hunched over her table, typing furiously. Is there news or isn't there? Yes and no. I'd never heard of the Rifagian, but they're in the records. They come from the leeward side of Parst, so they're Niblifos. So far I've confirmed they were working here. For Duchess Eliana too, but that's all. I think they've gone dark. Niblifos. So not allies, but not enemies either. One of the warbands who'd been too distant to matter. Still, if a warband had gone dark, that was cause for concern. Even enemies kept track of one another. The wisdom of 15th Kachakt meant there were friends, enemies, and everyone else. This far from home, an awareness of everyone else came first. At least meeting this boy wouldn't necessarily entail the fight she prepared for. It was troubling Zenshiki had not mentioned this past yet, but perhaps it was much about nothing. The agent had been trying to goad her throughout their interview, but if the Ruthagian went dark, what would possess them to leave a child, a male, here? Just as she was about to pester Sunchaser for more information, her nose picked up the scent she'd been seeking. There were countless species thronging this place. The scent of a Pezran male, which had been lingering in the background, grew suddenly stronger. Marakhett cast about the room. There. So that was Parst of the Ruthagian. At least now she could understand what the fuss was about. Her daughter's silence meant Zenshiki was probably stalking with care. That was sensible, given the competition a male would create with her band sisters. Parst emerged from a service corridor, assisting two Giovanti males guiding a dolly laden with food to a table. His fur was as black as her own, though the blaze at his throat ran tantalizingly down his chest. He wore a silly black bow at his neck, though that seemed de rigueur for the staff in this establishment. She observed him with interest as he finished helping them serve, noting the way he deftly avoided a woman's attempt to grab his Asayak. In a place where privacy was a commodity, now seemed as good a time to reveal herself. While Parst had his back to her, he stiffened, undoubtedly catching her presence as she lingered in the shadows. She approached silently, and waited as he dismissed the others. Commendable. Hey, sexy. I wondered when you His words froze as he turned to face her. Hi. Welcome to the tide pool. Parst's senses perked up as he detected the familiar scent, though it barely cut through the array of smells from the platter of Helcom fusion cuisine he just served at table 61. Despite the lingering aroma, he was sure he'd know that scent anywhere. Zenshiki. It had to be. Drawing in another breath, he waved at Ablo and Lirat as they returned to the kitchen. The lunchtime crowd was in full swing, but he could spare a few minutes. Straightening his bow tie, he drew himself into a formal pose, and suppressed a purr of satisfaction. Zenshiki was dark, spiky, and had a moody temper. Who knew a woman like that could be so damned appealing? Hey, sexy. I wondered when you Parst's words froze as he faced the woman before him. Not Zenshiki. Very definitely not Zenshiki. But she smelled just like her. Oh. Well, fuck. Great job there. He had the presence of mind to remain still, and focused on holding his Asayak steady. It had been years since he scented a Pezran besides Zenshiki, but he still remembered the way family scents intertwined. The woman before him had to be related. Hi. Welcome to the tide pool. The woman standing appeared unarmed, at least visibly. The combat vest she wore looked comfortably broken in, and he managed not to swallow at the sight of the kill rings prominently displayed on her ear. He cautiously took another sniff. Her sable pelt matched his own, though the white blaze at her throat was far smaller. Goddess, do I remind Zenshiki of her? I am Marakhett, she said flatly. You wish to be courted by my daughter. Of her mother. Parst's mind raced as he considered his options. It was certainly true that he was single, and Zenshiki appeared to have a good situation, and in her own unique way she made it clear she was interested. Homicidal, but interested. Of course, he'd played it cool. You learned that working at the tide pool, if you didn't want to be poured by the crowd into fur, and she hadn't made it a question. Sweet goddess, what do I say? That left fight or flight, while Marakhett stood there scrutinizing him. Yes, I do, he blurted. What the fuck? Why did I say that? Good, I know, my daughter, so kindly do so without pretending you aren't interested in each other. It's tiresome. Marakhett flicked her aside in a complicated flip that he tried to call to memory as she turned away. Be true, or else. Or else, Parst bridled, despite himself. He'd worked hard to put his life together, and while Sinchiki courting him was one thing, being coerced into it was something else. This was his home, Deeps take it. His pelt bristled as he stood his ground. Or else what? You'll cut me into wafer-thin pieces? Marakhett paused, a hint of fang showing as she regarded him archly. Or else I tell my band's other daughters all about you, and this place, and possibly even other war bands. I'm sure you become very popular. Oh. Oh, shit. Hello, my old heart. How have you been? How is it being locked away? Don't you worry, in there you're safe. And it's true, you'll never beat, but you'll never break. Captain? Solani glanced over at Kalani as she entered ops. Her sergeant had an apprehensive look on her face. Normally Sergeant Diani would linger and be in the middle of some story, while Kalani and Vega would be occupied with their Rubik's block. Pod 6 had slipped out of ops without a word, and the apprehension in Kala's voice immediately set her on edge. What is it? She asked, as she slid into the left seat. Any updates on station? Perimeter secure, Faye said quietly. Pod 3 is on station and reports 12 by 12. The objective secure, Kala added. It was the absence of anything else that made her stomach flip. Usually, Kala and Faye were plotting over a game or the latest goings-on, talking about the coming movie night or arguing over last week's. This was... The silence was unsettling, and Solani's stomach churned into the deeps. The incident at the meeting had nearly killed her. Thank the goddess that was only her misunderstanding. But now... Tom always read his mail when he got home. The objective was there on screen 1, and she ran a check on her board, fighting off the impending dread that tore at her. She felt weighed down as she mechanically reached over and pulled up a camera on his home. He wasn't there, and she switched to the camera in Mever's apartment. Tom sat on the couch, clutching his omnipad. Tears rolled down his face as he sobbed silently. Oh, Goddess forgive me. What have I done? She turned off the camera as her world died inside.